Hey everybody. So we have some non-playoff team news here this afternoon, and it's pretty big news. It's Steve Yzerman is expected to be named the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings. The press conference is taking place at 3 p.m., about an hour from now from when I'm recording this. And I think it's pretty safe to say most of us saw this coming. But still, it wasn't a done deal. Now it seems to be a done deal. But this is what we expected to happen when Yzerman stepped down as Tampa Bay Lightning GM earlier this year. We knew what was, what we thought the plan was going to be for Yzerman, and that's before this season, or at the beginning of this season, I forget exactly when it was, but if it wasn't before, it was at the very beginning of this season. He stepped down as Tampa Bay Lightning general manager and handed it off to the assistant GM. He stayed with Tampa Bay in an advisory type role as like a senior advisor, but he was no longer doing the day-to-day, general manager management stuff. So, we knew that he was leaving Tampa for a reason, because, he's done a great job with Tampa Bay and putting that team together. And he obviously was not in any danger of losing. Like, there was no reason for him to leave Tampa Bay, except there was really, I think, only one thing that would bring him out, and that's to go back to Detroit, where he played his entire career and was the captain for 20 years in Detroit. I mean, if there was anywhere, if he was going to leave Tampa Bay, it was to go to Detroit and be the GM there. And when Yzerman stepped down in Tampa, everybody's original thought was next year he's going to Detroit. That was the only thing that made any sense for why he would leave Tampa. So after he stepped down in Tampa, moved to a senior advisory role, you didn't really hear anything about him at all for most of this season. But now Tampa has been knocked out of the playoffs in the shocking first-round sweep. Detroit was never even in the playoffs, so now Yzerman was free. He could do whatever. And it appears that what we all thought was going to happen is happening. He will be the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings next season. Actually, not even next season, starting today. So, this is pretty big news for the Red Wings, who obviously haven't been to the playoffs in a couple years. They're certainly in a rebuilding stage with their franchise. They've got a lot of older players, who are well past their prime. They've got some really young players who aren't necessarily up to NHL standard, and they're in their primes yet. So they're at a crossroads where they still have a decent number of bad contracts and some really old, washed-up players. And then they have some really good young talent, but they are not ready to be a winning team yet. Yzerman did a heck of a job putting the Tampa Bay Lightning together in their current incarnation. So one would think he's going to do a good job with the Red Wings as well. And Ken Holland, who is the current Red Wings GM and has been the GM there for a long time now, is going to stay with the organization. At least that's in the report that I read. He's going to stay within the organization as a senior advisor type person, but he will no longer be making the, day-to-day roster decision. He won't be doing the general managing of the club anymore, which is probably a good thing for Detroit, because Ken Holland had some incredible teams in Detroit and some very, very good years there. I don't think he is necessarily the guy that you want doing a rebuild in the modern NHL. He hasn't really shown that he's been able to do that. So they're bringing in Yzerman, who has really built Tampa into a powerhouse the last few years, and Detroit obviously wants him to do that with the Red Wings. And for Yzerman, he's going back home where he spent his NHL career, where he's a living legend. Stevie Y, if you go to Detroit, the numbers hanging in the rafters, the Stanley Cups have been won. Stevie Y is a legend in Detroit, and now he's going to be the general manager of the team. And this isn't just a case of, sometimes we see teams bring back, former stars or, ex-players as GMs because the fans really enjoy it, and want to see that, what that player can do. But a lot of times those players that get brought back in roles like that don't necessarily have a lot of experience, or no one really knows if they'll actually be good at their job. We've seen plenty of times where former players get management roles, and just because you're a former player does not mean you're a good GM or a good assistant GM or whatever. So we've seen situations where that does not work out. But Yzerman, completely different. He has a proven track record as an NHL general manager. He has been a GM before. This isn't like, he just retired and the Red Wings are like, okay, you're not playing anymore. Come right up to the GM box and start managing the team. Yzerman has been a GM. He's been a very good GM. He has a proven track record, and I think this is a tremendous hire for the Red Wings. I still look at Detroit and think that they're probably not a playoff team next year, or maybe even the year after. But I think as we get into this, as we get 2-3 years down the road, I think we're going to see the Red Wings back in the playoffs. They have some really, really good young players that I like a lot. Over the next couple of years, they need to shed the bad contracts. They need to get rid of the older players. The guys like Eriksson and Cronwall and Mike Green and Thomas Vanek, who just aren't good anymore. Just not good anymore. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much all I got on that. But, we said this back when Yzerman stepped down in Tampa. We thought that he was going here to Detroit, back home to where he's played and is a legend, and that completely appears to be the case. The press conference announcing it will be in a few minutes, and the Red Wings have a new GM, to much to the delight of most Red Wings fans, who I think at this point had just about had it with Ken Holland. So the fact that Yzerman's in there is huge for the team and huge for the fans as well. And we'll see what he does with this Red Wings team. They have a long way to go, but they have some really good pieces there. So like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.